Alright guys, HyDra here, and I hope you're doing well and enjoying all day so far. Roster questions are a big discussion at this point of year, with many changes seriously needing to be made, it seems, before the World Championship, potentially after as well for the Esports World Cup. OpTic have gone through about 5 rosters this year. Looks like this one, though, is the one to stay from now to the end of the year, but big questions have been raised, certainly with Mercury's delivering that if he continues to do so and the team doesn't work out, what exactly could well be next. Hex makes it very clear, Shotzzy is definitely not going anywhere unless he decides to walk away himself. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new, as always. I greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. Octane, of course, was talking yesterday about this clip that we got into. The Plumber Era was the general discussion around this. Nowadays, it's far easier to shoot your gun than it used to be back in the day. Now, look, I know these shots look a little bit shaky, which they are, but shooting without aim assist is not easy. And back in the day, that's how it was outside of a certain range. This gunfight with the K-bar, for example, there was absolutely no aim assist on this at all. This is, I mean, back in the day, there used to be a thing, and there still kind of is today, but there used to be a thing called left stick aiming, where instead of aiming with the actual, button to aim with, you would instead use your movement to strafe and, bring your shots onto target, because, it's so difficult with a thumbstick with no aim assist to nail shots down range with the gun that has recoil. So sometimes the idea would be to actually use your left stick. It would help you with aiming a little bit more, would help you kind of drag those shots back onto target, and instead of messing around with the right stick too much. That used to be like a commonly done thing for some of the top players, and look, it's still used, it's still relevant, but it's certainly not what it used to be in terms of like how you'd have to actually have skill. But nowadays is a little bit of a different story. Now, Hexsmith yesterday comes out with some analysis on why this was actually true. I didn't realise it was actually to this extent back in Infinite Warfare. I remember that I think the numbers from Black Ops 2 were in BO2, if you had an SMG, it might have honestly been BO3, so I might be misremembering this, but basically an SMG would lose any aim assist after 38 meters, and that's how it was. I think even it was true for some of the ARs, they would lose aim assist after but it was like 78 meters or something, right? In that, I think that was BO3. This is the case here in Infinite Warfare, when, yeah, sure, close range, you're still getting this rotational aim assist, no problem at all, but after 30 meters, it would completely disappear, right? That's what he's showing here, is that on the retaliation, at this kind of range, outside of 30 meters, you weren't getting any aim assist at all. Now, as I say, back in the day, it used to be different with different weapons, so the SMG would get aim assist to a certain range and then nothing after that. The AR would have a longer aim assist range, but of course it would be weaker up close because of the general characteristics of the weapon. But just by way of comparison to today, that number, instead of 30, 38, 70, whatever, is now 200, right? And this is the talk about Warzone, Ruin, COD. Like, since MW19 came around, that range has been practically infinite for basically every gun. It just doesn't matter anymore. Whether you've got a SUR, whether you've got, maybe pistol is short, I don't even know, right? But the point still stands that back in the day, taking long-range gunfights, certainly with an SMG that had recoil, was simply not possible. In recent times, it has, of course, been a very different story. So understandably, some of the OGs, Trey, Don, were talking about it on the show last night, saying, look, this is the Plumber Era. There's loads of bum players, there's loads of bum teams, and, look, here are some of the examples, right? At the end of the day, are we going to look back on this era in, 5 years' time, assuming the CDL is still around, at least in some form, and say, damn, that was a stacked era, what a league we had that season, right? I'm not necessarily sure that we are. So, I understand the player's perspective and both angles on this, really, but intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Of course, the other big discussion with regard to some of these teams is what happens next, right? Because Surge, they've been looking good, they made back-to-back finals, they may do so again, but they're 1-2 here online so far. The rest of their stint, I think they play Toronto and they play Rocker Surge, so, they'll probably end up 2-3, possibly there, we'll see. Of course, they're still really good, but Toronto online so far have been pretty difficult to stop. Rocker have been very stoppable, right? Just go to a game 5 and you're probably going to beat them, although that was the case for Gentamate and they lost, but, this is what they do. Gentamate also still play OpTic as well, right? So, Cloud9, they're looking okay to make the winners bracket. I think realistically for the World Championship qualification, Cloud9 and Rocker are both 40 points behind OpTic right now. That's a big gap to overturn and probably isn't going to happen at all. But Cloud9's final game is against Thieves, so it's more of an and, really, right? It's difficult points for them. Also, it's a game that Thieves need to win because they're 1 and 2 in their own right. They could do with a better seeding for the major as well. So that C9 Thieves series is going to be tough for Cloud9. OpTic have a series to come, I think, against Gentlemates and then against Toronto, right? So OpTic will be feeling pretty confident they can at least get, another 10 points on the board. That might put them 40, 50 points ahead going into the major, which effectively means that OpTic would need to get another top 8 and Cloud9 would need to make the finals or something in order to overturn that kind of a deficit. Not to say that's completely impossible, but yeah, right now OpTic, of course, should be feeling pretty happy about their situation. There will be 4 teams, though, that don't make it to champs, and as a result, those teams might need to consider what changes that they want to make. I mean, Cloud9, certainly. Falcons, absolutely, there'll be consideration there. I think it's true for Rocker, of course, if they don't make it. And then Gentlemates, I'm sure, will likely turn up to the World Cup with a fundamentally different roster to what they have today. That would be the expectation, of course. The teams that go to champs, it's likely that their team will be the same going into the World Cup. They possibly could change it around. There is a roster lock happening, I think, in a couple of days, but I don't know how set that roster lock really is. I mean, like, Falcons are going to go to Major 4, they're going to compete with this team, they're probably after that going to make some changes for the World Cup, I would imagine, maybe even among players that could be available on the other teams that don't make it. Do you think the Esports World Cup are making sure the deadline is absolutely locked in and there's no doubt at all that, the changes being made are done within the rules for Falcons? I mean, look, I imagine exceptions could potentially be made if a team wanted to make a change outside of the roster lock, right? But look, OpTic have had about 5 rosters this year. It's very rare that a team wins the World Championship and in the following season they go crazy with the changes. I mean, we've seen before the Champs curse, right? Teams blow up a year after winning Champs, sometimes even sooner, as has happened many a time, both times with OpTic after they've won champs. Of course, their team was not the same at the end of the season. But last time, when the dynasty broke up in World War II, it was not this chaotic, right? Like, of course, they didn't have a pred event and that type of stuff that happened earlier on in the season. But OpTic, the dynasty, parted ways. Formal went to LG, Karma went to the bench for some time, and they brought in Methods and Octane. But that was it, right? They made their change. Wasn't great change, but like that's what it was. This season they've gone through so many iterations, it's difficult to understand exactly where they might go next, or frankly whether they need to at all. Mercules, I think, was a great find. Shout out to Toronto for making it happen. I think many of the, let's say, general managers and coaches in the league, I wouldn't say need to be held, well, they do need to be held accountable, but the point that I'm trying to make is that if Beans hadn't had his visa issues and Mercules had never debuted for Toronto, this guy would not be in the league right now. He wouldn't be on OpTic right now. He might not even be in the league next year. You simply never know, right? So sometimes these opportunities simply work out in your favour. That's certainly been the case of Mercules. And look, we discussed it yesterday on the Dope Check show as well, the fact that it's not like OpTic are necessarily a young team anymore, right? Dashy has been around for nigh on a decade. His first competitive year was back in 2017. That's a long time ago. Huke's first competitive year was Advanced Warfare. We're talking like 2014, 2015. That's a long time ago. And Shotzzy's been around a long time now too as well. I mean, he won the Halo World Championship 7 years ago before he came to COD. So it's not like these guys, as much as they still feel to me, OpTic, like, younger, newer generation players, the reality is they are veterans at this point, and, it was inevitable that they probably needed to try and find somebody from the up-and-coming generation, and Mercules, it seems like, is going to be that man. But a couple of clips I wanted to share here. Mercules was talking about challenges as well, discussing, Pro Loot and Standy are some options that the league teams should consider. Hex, though, was discussing how right now, with the way that challenges is set up, it simply doesn't really make sense to support as a competitive product from OpTic's perspective, which totally makes sense, right? Like, we've talked about this for some time. The league needs to, maybe have a couple of conversations here to say, okay, what would it take for this to make sense for some of these teams to actually come down and have academies? Because in the Valorant ecosystem, not every team does it, but many teams do have an academy roster down in Tier 2, and there are plenty of organizations supporting it, largely due to the promotion relegation situation that entices teams to play, but of course not the case in COD. That will probably change in due course, but we've talked about some of these issues for years and they've not necessarily gone away. The other point, though, that Hector mentions is around Shotzzy, because as of late, Shotzzy has probably been the OpTic player under the most criticism, really. I know that people still talk about Huke, and maybe for good reason. There's still some questions what happens when we go to LAN, but nonetheless, Huke's been, I think, very good this year. Dashy is Dashy, although he's not been amazing this season. Mercules, of course, should not be going anywhere for OpTic for a very long time. But Shotzzy, with all the drama at the start of the season, in January, especially with all the tweets that he was doing, then it all went downhill, obviously. And then Shotzzy, as of late, has not been making the best individual, let's say, decisions in the game. But, I mean, there's no doubt that Shotzzy's just so talented that there's just in no world can you get rid of him, right? But I know that he's been under pressure from OpTic fans to step up his game, which I think is understandable. And Hex says, look, Shotzzy is part of OpTic and he's not going anywhere.
I wish more CDL teams had challengers teams. Jetty, that's not even the point that we're trying to relay here. It's not about us not wanting to have like OpTic. Look, we don't have a challengers team because for what? If we're gonna put resources and effort, and that obviously has a very, very clear line to an expense column, and then there's nothing churning back. Like I think we need the league to step up and do a little bit better, or let somebody else fucking do it. Okay. No money in challengers. Kelvin, I know that that's the perception, right? But it doesn't have to be that way. Like, if you have a good product, people are going to want to put some branding behind it to advertise around it. I don't know. I don't know where we go from here. But I mean, it's clear that we need, we need these things churning. Does Shotzzy's contract end this year? And if so, would you let him walk? Or are you gonna do your best to make him your new Scump? No one's gonna be a new Scump the way that no one's gonna be a new Shotzzy the way there's nobody. That doesn't exist. It's not. Okay. Shotzzy is here to stay for as long as he wants to stay here. I love the kid. OpTic is a friendship team, period. And what? Okay, so long story short, I listen, we're also working on, like, when you come into my orbit, we're not just working on this thing, right? Like, we have other things that we can expand to, that we can work on together. You know what I'm saying? Dylan Envoy is no longer an OpTic, but we are co-investors in Pine Park. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's still gonna benefit from the work that we continue to put out there. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's always gonna be a friend. There's always gonna be a chair for him at my table, if you may. Like, Shotzzy and us are working on different things. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's almost a little bit of a responsibility for me to try to expose them to the opportunities that I personally have because of what I've done. So
it's been a very interesting season for Shotzzy, right? Because, like, he's not exactly the new Scump or whatever, as Hex scares, like, there isn't a new Scump, but Shotzzy has been the face of the league and the face of OpTic now for a fair bit of time, and for very good reason, right? Entertaining personality, phenomenal COD player, and, we've got to the point this season where things have been so chaotic that Shotzzy's found himself under serious pressure from the fan base. There have been some saying, look, if this doesn't work out, Shotzzy, it's time to go, right? Like, they've got to choose between Shotzzy or Dashy or something like this. I don't know if they necessarily do. I mean, of course, that team has won together, but there's other things they need in their arsenal, I think, if they want to be successful. Of course, we talked about how important Kenny was to that team. They no longer have a figure quite like Kenny around there. Not to say that it couldn't be possible to replicate some similar success, but look, we don't know right now what this new roster is capable of. They've only played a couple of teams so far. They lost to Boston in 5. They smoked Ravens. Mercury's looked real good, but how are they going to fare against a real top team? Right now, we just don't know. But Shotzzy's play has been attracted some criticism in terms of decision-making that he's made, but I think Hex is right to say, look, Shotzzy's such an important factor on multiple angles that, like, OpTic will never be... Shotzzy is the Warlord. He will remain the Warlord, and it's very unlikely to imagine a scenario where Shotzzy gets dropped or removed or whatever off this team. Shotzzy could leave. It's not an absolute impossibility. We've talked about it before. that Shotzzy and FaZe maybe didn't exactly hold discussions, but there was certainly talk about it a couple of years ago, and Shotzzy even mentioned it this season, that it was a possibility that him going to FaZe when Scump retired, and then he didn't retire, and then he retired eventually, but a couple of months later, that was a very big moment in terms of OpTic actually keeping Shotzzy around, because otherwise he would have considered that. So if FaZe want to make a change, if Thieves want to make a change, then sure, maybe Shotzzy gets a call, and it's a difficult decision, but like assuming that doesn't happen, I think the point is that like Shotzzy's never going anywhere from OpTic. And look, as Hex says, look, we are a friendship organisation, and that's always been true, and that's perfectly fine. You know, friendships can be important to winning team environments, right? I think there's no doubt, but the point is, of course, to make your teammates your friends rather than your friends your teammates is the historical idea, and that tends to work out pretty well when it happens. But also, I think Shotzzy's just so good and talented that it's difficult to imagine that he's going to be detrimental to their success in the longer term. But, you know, and also Shotzzy's a smart guy as well. It's just sometimes he makes decisions which cause questions among the community, let's say. But we're going to leave it there for now. Very much interested to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.